Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar series. We're so happy you could join us today for today's webinar on protecting your nonprofit from financial fraud. We're excited to partner with your part-time controller for this webinar to get some of the best financial processes advice from them on how to add another layer of protection on top of IT and technical preventative measures. We're going to talk about wire fraud in particular today with some examples, but we'll cover other scams and schemes also.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good afternoon. My name is Carole Melvin. I'm a senior manager and market leader for YPTC's Washington, D.C. office.
My name is Matthew Eshleman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. Great. So we'll talk a little bit now about some specific examples so that we can start putting these kind of top-level concepts into practice. And so the first thing that we'll talk about is what the FBI calls business email compromise. And so this is their infographic that kind of talks about how these adversaries or these threat actors will identify a target. So again, many nonprofit organizations do a great job on their website of highlighting the great staff that work there and the different roles that they play, which is a great thing to do. However, it's also used by these cyber threat actors to find out who the accounts payable person is, who are the finance people, and then use that information to craft specially tailored emails that are designed to elicit a response and designed to get people to take action on that. So if they can establish that communication, establish that conversational engagement, then they're able to then leverage that into getting somebody to take an action that they're kind of coerced or tricked into taking.
Right. And we've seen in our organization that, thieves and scammers will always try to capitalize on a crisis. And certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has been no exception. Anti-fraud experts have seen a rise in these phishing scams, and we've seen that play out in a number of our clients as well. So getting back to that example, of Phil Abundance, just as Matt just explained, the scammers made their request appear legitimate using real details and information that was specific to the business. And sometimes it's not always clear where they obtained that information, but in this case, Phil Abundance was going through a construction project. They were nearing completion of a $12 million community kitchen, a project that was visible to the public. So the thieves infiltrated their computer, the Phil Abundance computer system, and then they put in controls that blocked the legitimate emails from the construction, from the contractors. They blocked those from getting through. And then the final step was the spoofing email that mimicked the invoice from the construction company. So it was very clever and sophisticated. Phil Abundance was expecting a real invoice. So when that invoice for $923,000 came in, they paid it. And of course, it's often impossible to get that money back. So we've seen a number of other incidents very similar to this, where the cyber thieves infiltrate an organization's email server. They create fake invoices that mimic the real vendors. We saw another case this past year where the the scammers posed as a large consulting firm who was actually doing work for the organization. They sent the invoice with instructions to wire the money to the thieves' account, and the folks in the accounts payable did that. They sent the money to the thieves' account. We've also seen another case where thieves, again, using email to gain access, pretended to be a valid current employee, asking for a change in direct deposit, of course, going to the scammer's account. So we know that, we tell our clients never send money via wire transfer, money order, or prepaid debit card like Green Dot Money Pack without first verbal or visual verification, because these methods of payment provide little or no recourse for scam victims. And they present real obstacles for law enforcement in identifying the thief. So you always, we'll talk more about how to help prevent. Of course, we can never always fully prevent fraud from happening, but we do have some helpful tips later on. And so I'll just mention other creative examples we've seen. We've seen thieves posing as health and human service employees, offering to put people on vaccine waiting lists last year, for a fee, or offering to sell or ship vaccine doses, and falsifying invoices of sales of COVID-19 medical equipment. And then, of course, last year, we also saw, or 2020, we saw a lot about of scams about the misuse of the PPP loan monies. So they get really clever. They're constantly upping their game and changing. So it's there's a lot of incidents that you need to keep up with.
Yeah, so let's take a look at some of those specific examples that I think we see on a fairly regular basis.
Sure. So this example, this email or text message may look like it's from a company that you know or trust. It might be from a vendor, a bank, a credit card company, a social networking site, an online payment website or app. And they often, will tell you a story to trick you into clicking on a link or opening an attachment. They may say that they've noticed some suspicious activity or login attempts, claim that there's some problem with your account. They include a fake invoice, as we've talked about, and they want you to click on a link to make a payment. We've just recently seen text messages. This is becoming even more frequent than the emails, it seems like. And again, it's also hard to tell whether that is real or fake. And then, in all of this, we're trying to, to help you prevent and detect. So as we said before, there is the human element. So we always want to talk about not just in the wire fraud or cybersecurity, but the greater fraud landscape. Is we always want to have promote environment of healthy skepticism. So if you get that email from the executive director, asking you to wire transfer money immediately, you need to have that that moment where you think about, in the training that you've learned, would my executive director really, just email me and ask me to do that, or would they most likely call, or Zoom or call or text. So we need to train people to look for some of those phishing schemes, such as the misspellings, the grammatical errors, and Matt's going to talk a little bit more about that. There's ways you can, help detect a spoofed email address by hovering over it. We tell clients use forward instead of reply. So you are forced to type in a known email address. And always, don't return calls to an unfamiliar phone number. Make sure you look up the company phone number from a reliable source.
Yeah, so I think those are all good tips. And now we're going to actually take a look at an incident that we responded to at Community IT with an organization, actually a sponsored organization for one of our clients. And so here, here's the gotcha. So names have been updated to obfuscate who is targeted here. But again, I'm sure many of you have seen similar things that look like this. From the executive assistant at what we now know is a compromised domain to the executive assistant at a foundation that was providing grant funding. They CC'd the managing director and the executive director at the compromised organization. So, hi, hey, we've made some changes to our payment information, disregard previous payment, and let's see if we can proceed with getting you the updated information. So from there, we'll go and take a look at the actual email thread that occurred in this case. So, here we can see that original email thread. So we can see that it starts off with from the executive director to the managing director. Then the managing director at the foundation is replying. They follow up. Any news? Let's make sure that we can get the payment information. We need to schedule some time. So this is in Wednesday in August. All right. Now the executive assistant then responds, hey, sorry about that. We've had a delay in processing. We've got a glitch in our system. Invoice is approved. First invoice is approved. Second invoice has been uploaded. Then we can see, obviously people are busy. We can't talk to the executive director. Let's find some time to talk. We get a nice response. Sure, we understand. Let's figure things out. When can we get together? And we know around this time basically is the executive director at the organization along with the executive assistant all had compromised accounts. And so this is the hacker or the fraudster is engaging with the organization or with the foundation. So now we have kind of the ask. So we know that the account has been compromised. They've been watching all the communications and now they're inserting themselves into the conversation to direct the foundation to update the payment information so that the funds could be directed into the fraudster's account and not the nonprofit's account. So the executive assistant follows up, followed by the executive director following up on the same email, right? So the executive director account is also compromised and is following up. So now the foundation has received communications from two people at the organization asking to change the payment information. The foundation replies, hey, we can do that. We need to have a name, an email, and phone number. We're going to DocuSign it. It's clear that they're following some established procedures to update payment information. Now we get into the executive director is, hey, due to time difference, and so this is a UK-based organization. So here's the person, our new account person. Her name is Angela Bergdorf. They can only be contacted by email because of time differences. And then again, if you're paying attention, there's a misspelling there. They do provide a new email address. So in this case, it was actually like accounts payable at the organization. So the hacker created a new account to use and then also provided a phone number so that they could confirm the payment information. All right, so then the executive assistant at the foundation replied, all right, we've passed that information along. The executive assistant, hey, we need to confirm. And so we're going to call. Can you give us that phone number again? So the hacker is replying, here's the bank information, it's ACH. Here's my contact information. So again, they're instructing the foundation to contact them. We can see the executive director is following up again, like, hey, we've requested these changes. Is it updated yet? The hacker is reaching out saying, hey, I can't get in touch with you. Can you help me figure out what's going on? As technology goes, the executive assistant at the foundation is having tech problems. And so her carrier has been down. And so they don't have access to the laptop. And so they're now just getting access to it. So again, there's some back and forth. The hacker is following up saying, give me a call. Here's my number. To validate the conversation or the change, we can see the executive assistant is having some problems getting in touch with the hacker. Again, can you give me a call back? We got bad reception. You can just kind of see this happening over the course of time. Here's the updated phone number. The hackers now provides them an office and a mobile number for the accounts receivable. Being very helpful to provide contact information. I mean, you can almost see the person, like they know they're getting paid like really soon, and so there's some urgency. So they're following up again. All right. So it looks like Angela Bergdorf has now they got confirmation. So they went through a validation process. They updated the ACH payment information. They deleted the prior information as instructed. Now we see the hackers following up saying, hey, thanks. When can we expect the payment? And then the executive director, also compromised, is also following up. When can we expect payment? The executive assistant is looping in the grants accountant at the foundation along with the controller and the managing director, right? Hey, when are we going to be able to provide funding? Grant accountant replies, we still need to do verification. All right, we're all good. And now we have crisis averted. So we can see, that the managing director or the finance lead was able to follow, I guess, their established controls. And they identified that, hey, that this was not right. There's a mismatch and we're not going to be able to make the payment. So kind of crisis averted. You can see they looped in a whole bunch of extra people in this conversation. But again, you can see how the thread goes from the hacker taking over a couple of accounts at an organization and then using that to target the foundation in an effort to divert funds into their account. So whenever you look at this, Carole, like, what do you see?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I mean, this looks so familiar to the case that I was referring to earlier and some other cases. I think, the finance folks, they're already, many times overloaded. They're working hard. They're trying to get things done. So they're trying to be responsive. And, they often are, falling prey to this because they're not, they're trying to check something off and get it paid and be helpful. We've seen this, and it was interesting. A lot of the string that you showed it was on a Friday in August, and I think that those fraudsters, they in the case that I had, it was right around a major holiday. So they use that time. They know that people are want to get things done and want to get things crossed off. So they they could fall for it. In this case, they were lucky that somebody was paying attention.
Yeah. So again, really, kind of scary stuff, and we can kind of see why it's really important to have those protections on the account, because if you have a compromised account at your organization, that represents a liability and can be used to exploit relationships that your organization has with other partners. So this example that we're going to talk about is how fraudsters had a really well-planned and well-executed attack that would have been, I think, an 8-figure financial loss had it been successful. So in this case, it's likely that there were, multiple exploits in use, compromises at multiple different organizations that gave these fraudsters insight into how and when to attack. So that you can see, we'll see that they registered domain names, and we're launching a very sophisticated kind of multi-threaded attack. So again, Grameen Kuta, we've got IDFC Bank, we have a legal entity. So all of these elements were in play with this example here. So again, we can see the email from somebody at IDFC First Bank, no I, to a legitimate or an illegitimate recipient, the DR Manjunath at Kota 10, CC'd a legitimate person at the organization, 2 O's. We also have 1 O. And then we're CCing somebody at phoenixlegal.nl, which is controlled by the hacker, along with this account as well. Again, it starts off in a similar way. Previous bank account is unavailable due to technical error. Here, so the bank itself is providing the updated alternative trust bank details in the attached. Hey, sorry for the inconvenience. So this is a little bit of a shorter analysis that we have, but again, we can see in this case, again, as I mentioned, we've got typo squatting accounts where the hackers created and registered domain names that were very similar to banking and funding organizations. So yeah, I'm curious, Carole, what do you kind of see in these cases?
Well, I think you really covered it all really well, Matt. And I loved the interactive way. I think, I just want to be mindful of the time. So we probably want to jump to the tips, the financial processes and IT tools. So we know fraud happens. All right. And we've already talked about the best defense is heightened awareness. And this covers, the entire fraud landscape. But when it comes to cybersecurity, there are 2 policies that I want to mention. One is the privacy policy. You should establish a privacy policy. There's some great samples on Charity Navigator. They have a sample privacy policy, as does the Council of Nonprofits. Have a great privacy policy. And this should, talk about what personal information is collected and how the organization may use that information. The other policy that I want to mention is a data breach response plan. Matt has brought that up. Of course, the only thing worse than a data breach is multiple data breaches. So you need to have a data breach response plan. And this should include reporting protocols. Who do you tell and when? What is the response team roles and responsibilities? You want to assemble that team of experts. Legal, insurance, and accounting and IT. And you want to, make sure you come up with your communications strategy. Reach out to the cyber breach insurance, reach out to your insurance broker, and of course, notify law enforcement, the FBI, the Attorney General, whoever is appropriate. And then next, we're going to just talk about, the zero tolerance policy. There was a report released earlier in 21 by Verizon that looked at cyber attacks on businesses and found that 85% of the breaches resulted from somebody making a mistake, such as falling for a phishing email. So again, that training is really critical, because we know that either they're busy or they're naive, but that's why that training is really important. And I will say here, if fraud occurs and your staff does not tell you in a timely manner, that's a problem. We did have some of our cases where, the employee was ultimately terminated, not necessarily for falling for the phishing scam, but for not communicating it in a timely manner. So, if fraud happens, it should be a drop everything and communicate it as immediately, even if you don't have the whole story yet. Because once that trust is broken, and if someone doesn't report it because they're trying to maybe not come clean about it, that's probably a cause for termination. I think we can go quickly through the next slide. This gets into payroll and high risk areas, which I will just mention. We have seen fraud that technically it is wire fraud. Wire fraud being financial fraud involving the use of telecommunications or information technology. We had a nonprofit in Boston where the COO was able to steal money through wire transfers. So just always have it to look at. It's not just external. I mean, we used to always be focused on helping prevent and detect fraud internally, and now with all these scams, we're looking externally. But don't forget to look internally as well. This is again, technically a case of wire fraud. So look at all those high risk areas where cash is involved and payroll is involved. Okay, and then as we said, when fraud does occur, you need to have that policy and procedure to guide employees on the proper steps to take. We work with your IT and your accounting folks to come up with a fraud work plan. In the case of one of our clients, we came up with some steps. Right away, hold an emergency board meeting. Investigate further. Fraudsters rarely restrict their activities to only one method, so you need to block access and so forth. So again, the data breach policy and the cyber insurance is really important here. And then we can go on to the next slide. Again, always be skeptical. It's a lot of times it's just common sense. Avoid using public Wi-Fi. Don't use the same word for multiple sites. We always tell people that, but again, these things still keep happening. And I will just mention in one of the cases of our client, we had recommended that they look at their cyber enterprise risk management policy, because a lot of times insurance companies are now, carving that out. And they did, in this case, take our recommendation. And then unfortunately, in the next year, did fall victim. So the insurance, was there to protect them. But that's also something that if you haven't looked at, we recommend that you consult specifically with an insurance broker familiar with the nonprofit sector. And I think in the interest of time, we can probably skip ahead, Matt, to talking about some of the technology training of best practices.
Also, we have a number of different resources available. And so we will make those available. So again, I'll just go over these quickly and kind of get to the finalized kind of best practice checklist that I think combines the IT security controls. And so as we talked about in the beginning, the best defense is to have a trained and aware and engaged staff. And so security awareness training is really the best way to do that. We like online programs that allow you to kind of test and measure progress around people's ability to identify phishing messages, and then just get tips and tricks and kind of keep it front of mind. Along with that, we see that multi-factor authentication is absolutely critical to preventing those compromised accounts from happening in the first place. In 2020, whenever we did our incident report, we saw that about 97% of the account compromises that we responded to were with clients that had not implemented multi-factor authentication. And I think that's a number that kind of continues. So again, if you have not implemented multi-factor authentication already, that's a great next step to take. And then I think Carole can talk a little bit about those finance processes to help keep your organization secure.
Sure. So when we talk about, a fraud prevention toolkit, and the tools that you should have, we always talk about sort of three important buckets. One is that tone at the top. That's making sure that you are deterring any sort of fraud from happening. Conducting complete background investigations, making sure that people understand ethical behavior. That would get to someone, if they do fall victim to one of these cyber crimes, maybe they would be more apt to report it right away because they have that tone at the top and it's understood that there is zero tolerance, and they would come forward. So that's an important piece. And then we always talk about segregation of duties and making sure that folks, there is checks and balances and reconciliations. And of course, the last part, the policies and procedures, is that third bucket. And that's where, the insurance and the governance policies, but also that cybersecurity training for staff is one of our, most important tools in the toolkit.
Great. Yeah, and I think once you have those kind of policies and procedures and training and education, I think then you can move on to maybe investing in some more of those technology solutions. I will, say like none of these are foolproof. So, it's very rare that you're going to get an email protection solution that's going to block every bad thing from coming in. And so we can help block some, and maybe even a lot, but a certain amount of that stuff is going to go through. And so that's why that initial investment in your staff and training and process is really so important. So if I know we're at time, and so I want to hand it back over to Carolyn to kind of wrap us up and to talk about how they can continue to stay engaged with us.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, thank you so much, everyone who has stuck with us. And I see many of you have. This was such a great topic, and I'm sorry that we only had an hour for it. I feel like we could have talked a lot longer. Just for people who were asking in the chat, we will be posting this recording. And I also put it out as a podcast episode, and we'll have a transcript as well. But because we had to skip a couple of the slides there, we will also put up a PDF with all of the slides so you can see the best practices and tips that we kind of had to speed through a little bit there. Our next webinar for Community IT is Wednesday, March 16th. We're super excited. It's a webinar on diverse perspectives on thriving in nonprofit tech careers. It's going to be a panel of 3 amazing women of color in different tech roles talking about creating inclusive workplaces. And it'll be at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. You can register on our site. And I just want to thank everyone for the great questions today. And thank you so much, Carole and Matt, for sharing your experiences with us and helping us put together these tips and best practices to prevent financial fraud at nonprofits. And I know I could definitely see myself and organizations I've been at that could easily fall for a lot of these different situations. And it just shows you how easy it is and how vital it is to, as you said, Carole, to cultivate that attitude of skepticism. With the executive director, really email me about this if it's that important. So I just feel like you gave us a lot of great stuff to think about and talk about. So I'm just going to recap quickly our learning objectives and the takeaways. So we talked about specific types of financial fraud that use technology, including wire fraud, sending actual money to a different bank account than you meant to. The financial processes you can use to prevent that fraud, to add that extra layer onto your regular IT tools that you use for cybersecurity, such as multi-factor authentication, having regular training with your staff so that they know how to spot those phishing emails or the spoofed domain names that we went through. We talked about the importance of creating a strong internal culture around financial precautions, and also about training your staff, not just on steps to take to avoid that fraud, but also when you detect fraud, to have established procedures to report it immediately. And that includes, if you're the one who clicked on the fake account. And that workforce and workplace environment is something that has to come from leadership, that your executives need to own as a part of their fraud prevention efforts. So I think I got out of this that you can't just turn on an IT tool and have that protect you. It really starts with your people. And you can have all the IT tools in the world, and we have a lot of IT tools available to us. But if you don't have that training and that skepticism and that leadership, the tools themselves aren't going to be able to help you. And that just, we talked at the beginning about it's financially so important to be able to prioritize taking the time now to have those procedures and that training and that attitude, because you will be paying for it later if you don't do it now. And finally, we provided a very rapid, informal wrap-up of these tips and best practices. So we will have those available on our site as well. If you need further advice or consulting, you can always follow up with us. But I want to just make sure I give a disclaimer that we can't, Community IT and YPTC are not offering specific financial or legal advice in this webinar. This is for a general audience. You should talk directly to your organization's accountants or your counsel about any specific questions you have about anything that might relate to financial fraud. If you see it, if you need to say something, that's something you need to take up with your organization directly. In fact, that's one of the messages in this webinar, is that you need to know who to report to and how to report it when you see something that's suspicious. So I want to thank you again all for joining us. Thanks for going over a couple minutes, and thanks again, Carole and Matt.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.